Greetings, one and all. Welcome to the Deep Horror LofT. In this week's tale, a research team comes face to face with the world's loneliest creature and discover it isn't just lonely, it's hungry. Deep Horror LofT presents 52 Blue. Anything on the mics? I asked as I entered the cabin. My assistant, ironically named Mike, glanced up and shook his head, a ponderous thing to do with the massive headphones on. Realising how he must look, he smiled sheepishly. Nothing, he said, removing them. Last recorded contact was 12 hours ago. He handed me the headphones, vacating the seat so I could take his place. Coffee? He asked. I flashed a thumbs up, not bothering to see if he acknowledged it at all. With the headphones on, my mind filled with the sounds of the sea. Our research vessel, the Alton, bobbed slightly on the azure Indo-Pacific waters. We were anchored in 20 metres near the Great Barrier Reef, searching for evidence of migrating whales. Their usual routes had altered for some reason. Nothing major, just some tagged individuals changing course and swimming erratically. According to our colleagues spread out over the world, they were still getting to where they needed to go, but taking much longer. Of course, this would eventually have a snowball effect on the ecosystem, potentially worldwide, so here we were, along one of the usual routes, listening for whale sign. And it was my job to listen the hardest, with Mike's support, of course. ROV see anything? I asked the person sitting at a desk on the opposite side of the cabin. Sheila shook her head without turning around, her blue eyes fixed upon the myriad of screens crammed into her workstation. Her remote-operated vehicle, a hardy little thing nicknamed Red Dog after the famous Australian Kelpie, zipped along the ocean floor, guided by Sheila's practiced hand. Its built-in scanners pinged their irregular tunes, which Sheila had programmed to sound exactly like the opening riff of Queen's Another One Bites the Dust, for a reason known only to Sheila. I watched for a minute or so, marvelling at Sheila's control and concentration. The quiet, demure engineer nursed Red Dog like a baby, and as well she should, because she was the one who had made it. Anyone who touched the little ROV without permission was given a first-hand lesson on the importance of ownership, as well as the possibility of a Hall of Fame tongue lashing. I smiled, remembering her last outburst. It had been so explicit. Still, Sheila's love for the ROV did not explain why I was out in the water now, especially with no whale sign on my soundboards. I asked as much. This time, she did turn around, fixing me with a stare that could only be called exasperated. New navigation program. Updated with reef topography. I'm testing it. I raised an eyebrow. By her tone, she'd already had to explain that a bunch of times, and I think I knew who to. Chris? Her silent eye roll gave me all the confirmation I needed. Professor Chris Spinks was in charge of our research vessel, and a world-renowned marine biologist, especially with fieldwork. But he was also a grade-A arsehole who made it his business getting in your business, especially when he had the hots for you. Unfortunately for her, Sheila was in that particular set of crosshairs. I cringed. Sorry. She waved a hand. Not your fault. Then she leaned forward. Hey, look at this. I stood, quickly checking my equipment. Still nothing. And rose from my seat, stretching as I made my way over to Sheila's station. She pointed at her central screen, a camera image from Red Dog's underbelly. The bottom was sandy here, a barren patch between the colourful reefs. A flat, dark shape zipped over the sand, clearly trying to get away from the strange metal creature. Stingray. Neat, I said dutifully, wondering why Sheila had called me over for something we'd seen thousands of times before. Nope, wrong, Sheila scoffed, hand still on the controls. Check this out. A few deft movements of her wrists, and Red Dog zipped past the ray, spinning on a tight angle to face it, cutting off its escape. Then, to my amazement, the ray stopped dead, and suddenly wasn't a ray anymore. The flat surface broke up, fanning out in a star shape. The dark colours flickered, and harsh, contrasting stripes radiated across the organism's surface. It puffed up, seemingly growing by the second. It hovered motionless above the sea floor, and I saw two horn-tipped eyes staring coldly into the camera. What the hell? I started, before suddenly recognising the shape. Is that an octopus? Sheila smiled. Yep, it's a mimic octopus. Not overly big, about 60 centimetres across, but unique. It mimics things. I get it. I cut her off, grinning. She glanced back over her shoulder at that, and I could tell that if she weren't piloting Red Dog, she would have slapped me upside the head. I grinned even wider. Yes, smartass, it mimics things. But not just one thing. They have a whole range. Flatfish, rays, sea snakes, jellyfish. She gestured at the screen, as the octopus stuck its arms out straight, becoming even more brightly coloured. Lionfish? And why would they do that? I asked, now genuinely interested. Sheila actually laughed at that. Oh, come on. Mr. Whale Recorder, just because you study animals too big to eat doesn't mean you can't realise why these things do it. Oh, right, to avoid predators, I said, actually embarrassed that I hadn't reached that conclusion. Clever. You have no idea, Sheila said, watching the posturing cephalopod on the screen. They're smart enough to actually mimic the specific predators of what's after them, like a sea snake when attacked by a certain fish species. Wow, that's awesome, I said, genuinely impressed. What about food? Can they mimic prey? It's never been recorded, Sheila said, backing down the ROV. With a new escape route, the octopus vanished in a cloud of ink. But who knows? Wait a minute, I said. You're an engineer. How do you know so much about this thing? Sheila glanced at me again, and her eyes sparkled. I read. Something about that look made my heart skip a beat. I began, not sure how to respond. Luckily, I was saved by a beep from my station. I hurried back, slapping the headphones over my ears. Two things assaulted my senses. The rhythmic tunes of Sheila's particular scanning choice. I dialed those down straight away. And what I'd been listening for. The low, haunting calls of a pod of humpback whales. I flicked the comm switch, broadcasting my voice throughout the whole ship. We got something, people. Get your asses in gear. Within minutes, everyone was there. Well, everyone who counted. Sheila, Mike, Captain Spinks, and our local guide and reef specialist, a happy little fellow named Bluey, so called because of his mane of red hair, an Australian classic. The rest of the crew continued about their business, keeping the ship running and all that. Bluey was practically jumping up and down in excitement. After all, it was his suggestion to anchor in this area. See, fellas, told you they'd be passing through, didn't I? Great stuff, Bluey, Mike started, before a glare from Captain Spinks silenced him. After all, it was his initial empty location that had led to Bluey's suggestion at all. I guess even experts don't like to be wrong, I mused quietly. Bring him, report. Spinks all but snapped, as if he couldn't see what I could. I winced at the surname. Sounds like a small pod. One large male, a couple of females, and a calf. Pretty standard for migration, I responded. Spinks turned to Sheila. Send in the ROV. He refused to call it by its name. Red Dog going in, she responded, swivelling back to the controls. A little space, please. We all dutifully stepped back, except Spinks. He actually got closer, leaning over Sheila's shoulder. It looked like he was getting a better look at the screen, but the deep inhale I heard said otherwise. Jesus, what a piece of work, Bluey muttered under his breath. Coming up on the whales now, Sheila announced, slightly leaning away from Spinks. Over her other shoulder, I saw the familiar, calm-inducing view of the three massive shapes gliding effortlessly through the water. A fourth, smaller shape darted amongst them, almost playfully. I couldn't help a smile spreading across my face. I'd seen more whales than most, but even I was still awestruck by these magnificent beasts. We getting wet, Professor? Mike asked. We had done that a few times so far on this trip. Jumped in to grab some film of the migrating whales, to see if we could answer any questions with visual data, pod size, swimming patterns, behaviour, and all that. However, it depended on two things, the speed of the pod and Spinks' say-so. He shook his head. Not this time, no point. He glanced at me. Get back on the mics and record until they're out of immediate range. With that, he turned back to Sheila, attempting to engage her in conversation as she kept Red Dog level with the moving pod. I sighed and trudged back to my station. As the headphones closed around my ears, I heard the others starting to file out. The humpback sounds reverberated through my mind. I settled into my chair and leaned back, and I stopped dead. There was another whale sound on my mic. Different than the humpbacks. Longer. Higher. Whoa, hold up. My voice surprised even me. We got something else. Without waiting to see if they'd heard me, I ripped the headphones away, punching a few buttons. My speakers beeped to life, flooding the cabin in whale song. The haunting deep notes of the humpback sounded melodically, but the new sound was there too, a higher, monotonous drone that seemed almost out of place. What the bloody hell is that? Bluey asked, shouldering his way back into the room. You tell me, Mr. Local, I replied, gesturing to the speakers. Never heard anything like that before, mate, Bluey said quietly, his eyes fixed on my equipment as if trying to see the whale making the sound. Sounds different than the others, Sheila commented. A different species. Blue whales? Sperm whales? Professor Spinks scoffed, while Mike shook his head. Doesn't sound like it. Too different. Too high frequency. He smiled at Sheila, knowing she was the only one in the room who wasn't a whale nut like we were. Okay then, so what is it? It was my turn to shake my head. I have no idea. Bring 'em, Spinks barked. Measure the frequency of the call. Taken aback by his abruptness, I nevertheless did what he said. I punched a few keys and brought it up on my screen. A few jagged lines appeared, the lower frequency humpbacks marked in blue, with the high frequency call of an unknown in red. I saw the number appear, with the humpback's hertz frequency hovering around the low 20s. However, when I saw the other number, I froze in disbelief. It's between 50 and 52 hertz, Mike muttered in astonishment. Is that? It most certainly looks or sounds like it, Spinks said, grinning. The 52 hertz whale, commonly referred to as 52 blue. 52 blue was a slang term given to a one-of-a-kind whale call that has been detected for over 30 years. Set at a higher frequency than other migratory whales, it's been recorded frequently in the Pacific, apparently following its own migration route. However, that whale has never been sighted, and for a long time remained the only one of its kind ever detected. This had caused it to be referred to as the loneliest animal in the world. A second signal was detected recently, but still no sightings. There are many theories as to what kind of whale 52 blue is, from a hybrid blue and fin whale to a new species entirely. However, the mystery endures, even to this day. All of this was relayed to an incredulous Sheila as we crowded around the sound station. I attempted to amplify and triangulate the location of the sound, but the very nature of whale song prevents me from doing so. All I can say is it's coming from the east, I told the professor, who shook his head. This is unprecedented. The 52 hertz whale has never been detected this far west before. We have to find it. His eyes fixed on me, and I mentally prepared myself for a barrage of orders. They never came, however, because Sheila whirled in her seat. Red Dog scanner's just lit up. Something's there, heading towards us. She looked back. From the east. The room went quiet as the weight of what was actually happening hit us. Mike wordlessly slid into the chair next to me, bringing up a radar map of the area. About 300 meters north of our ship, the four lips of the humpbacks were clearly visible. However, there was another blip on the screen, to the east, right at the end of our range, and, if the image was to be believed, something big. Professor Spink's voice was almost shaking. Is it another humpback, or... After a moment, Sheila, Mike, and I all swiveled around, exchanging glances with each other. Sheila broke the silence. Whatever that is, it's the source of the sound. 52 blue, Mike breathed. It's coming towards us, I finished. We all looked at each other in wonder. 52 blue had never been conclusively sighted, let alone filmed. A slow grin spread across the professor's face. Change of plan. Let's get wet. Mike and Bluey were left behind, much to their annoyance. Despite their harsh words, I could see the wisdom in Spinks' decision. Bluey was our guide, and needed to be on the ship to handle his crew. Mike was needed at the scanners, both visual and auditory. Sheila was able to control Red Dog from a HUD mounted on her forearm, but the consoles on the ship was where the data went. As for the auditory data, I simply outranked Mike. Still, while I agreed with the professor's decision, He didn't need to say it with quite so much glee. It didn't take long for Spinks, Sheila, and myself to suit up. Wetsuits, face masks, fins, and a small oxygen bottle each, along with Sheila's connection to Red Dog, high-definition cameras, and as much digital memory as we could carry. We stood at the rear of the Alton, staring out over the pristine ocean. As a grumbling Bluey gave our gear some final checks, I spoke to Mike over the comms. "Hey dude, what's the sitch with the whales?" "Humpback's still moving slowly. Little one's sticking closer to Mama though," he stated. "Sheila, I'm disengaging Red Dog from them and heading towards our new friend. That cool?" "No problem, Mike. Thanks for asking," Sheila replied. I smiled inwardly. At least some people appreciated Sheila's contributions here. "Enough," Spinks' voice ripped through our headsets. "What's it doing?" "Seems to be following the humpback, sir," Mike said, stressing the word sir. "Bluey changed course while you were suiting up. If it stays its current course, it'll come right by us in about 5 minutes. No acknowledgement from the professor. He merely gestured at me and Sheila. "Let's go." Without waiting for us to respond, he stepped off the rear of the ship, vanishing in a cloud of bubbles. Sheila and I exchanged glances, while Bluey flipped off the space where Spinks had been standing. "Go on," he said, turning to us. "Maybe he'll find his whale so he can stop bugging us." Sheila chuckled at this, and we both flashed a thumbs up, before hopping in the drink ourselves. The azure blue depths surrounded me. I looked down, able to clearly see the reefy bottom below us, a testament to the water clarity. The water wasn't shallow. I looked around as the bubbles cleared, heading back to the surface to get my bearings. Ducking back down again, I flashed an OK sign to Sheila. I spied Spinks about 20 meters ahead, moving steadily away from us. As we began to follow the professor, the whale sounds surrounded us, the familiar haunting melodies of the humpbacks, along with the unfamiliar, high-frequency call of the creature we hoped was 52 Blue. I smiled in my mask. It was amazing. We might be about to make history. There was also another soft sound, the unmistakable rhythmic bass of Queen's "Another One Bites the Dust." "Sheila," I said over the comms, "why Queen? Doesn't it scare the whales?" "Nope," she responded. "If anything, it sometimes makes them more curious, and they come closer." She turned to me and shrugged visibly. "As to why, no idea. Why not?" Shaking my head, I resumed kicking. I needed to exert myself slightly to catch up to the professor. He was clearly trying to outdistance us, and I had a sneaking suspicion why. Professor Chris Spinks was known in academic circles as a perennial glory hog. Sure, he knew his stuff, but he wanted to be the only person who knew his stuff. Still, his age belied his ability, as Sheila and I gained steadily. "Report," his clipped tone sounded on the comms. "Still heading in the same direction. Should be visible in less than 2 minutes. I'm sending Red Dog past you to check it out." "No, wait," Spinks began, before the small grey drone zipped past, about 20 meters to the right. It looked for all the world like a remote-controlled boat, with a few sleek modifications. The professor began to speak, when I piped up. "You know, it'd be a good idea to let Red Dog go on ahead. We don't know what we're dealing with here. We still need to think about our safety, as exciting as this all may be." Spinks grumbled, but assented in the face of overwhelming logic. We began to gather round Sheila, as Mike transferred control of the ROV to her wrist-mounted display. As we watched the small screen, a dark shape began to coalesce. At the same time, Mike's voice ripped through the comms. "It's here." The screen showed a dark grey, almost black silhouette. It was long and tapered, and moved with the up-down, undulating motion that belied a horizontal tail. While the motion was smaller than I expected, the ROV's camera showed it moving forward at a decent pace, deceptively fast for something so massive. Sheila swiped a few buttons, and Red Dog kept pace with it. The high-frequency sound reverberated all around us. "Amazing," Sheila murmured. I raised my head to smile at her, then froze. "Look." As one, we stared straight ahead. The dark shape materialized out of the azure backdrop, seemingly sliding through the water as it came into view. It was moving past us at an angle, and soon the dark flesh of the gargantuan beast was visible in the crystal-clear water. It was huge. I've studied blue whales before, and this creature was easily their equal, perhaps even bigger. I realised I'd forgotten about my camera and raised it, snapping a couple of images before flipping to video. "This is the find of the century," the Professor gasped. "No, the millennium." He began to swim closer. As he did, he barked orders at Sheila. "Get some close-ups. Approach from behind. We don't want to scare it off." As Sheila begrudgingly complied, I stared at the creature. I couldn't believe it. 52 blue. In the flesh. It slid through the water with ease. Its dark, sleek form was so unlike any other whale I'd seen. It even moved a little different, like its undulating tail was propelling it forward far faster than its flukes would allow. And those flukes, I realised, were different. Long and tapered, they almost hung behind the animal, drifting with the up-down movements. I frowned. It's almost as if the tail wasn't moving at all. Then the sound stopped. 52 blue seemed to shiver, almost ripple. There was a crisp, sharp, cracking sound. Moments later, our heads exploded with a burst of static. Mike's voice ripped through my head. "Red Dog just went dark." I whirled around in the water to face Sheila. She was tapping furiously at the display on her forearm, but it showed nothing but blackness. She looked up at me, confusion and budding apprehension on her face, visible even through her mask. Before she could speak, a horrible grinding and crunching reverberated through the water. It stopped as soon as it began. As one, we turned back to the massive form of 52 blue. It was closer now, about 70 metres from us, but seemed to be hanging in the water. Its strange movements had stopped. Mike seemed to have read my thoughts. "What's happening? Scanners show 52 blue has stopped. The other whales are hauling ass, though. Damn, they just shot out of range. The humpbacks are fleeing something." My blood began to freeze over. Prickles erupted along the base of my neck. Movement caught my eye. I squinted, seeing something sinking in the water. A tangled, scrunched mass of what could only be metal. It was Red Dog. It had been destroyed, crushed, torn open. Sheila's gasp sounded on the comms as the mangled ROV sank out of sight, beneath 52 blue. Beneath 52 blue. Professor," I said quietly, "I think we need to leave now." "A few more photos first," Spinks scoffed. "You can salvage later." He went to move closer, brushing off my arm as I tried to stop him. "Mike, what's it doing now?" Sheila asked. After a moment, Mike's voice responded. "Nothing. Just hanging there." "Something's not right," I murmured. Sheila glanced at me, and our eyes locked. She'd felt it too. I glanced back at the boat, about 100 metres behind us, before turning back. I pointed at the prone form of the massive whale. Its flukes are too small to propel it at the speeds we saw. Its skin looked strange, and I pointed at the dorsal side of the whale, where two knob-shaped growths seemed to jut out from the whale's body. "What are they?" Sheila asked. No idea. Oh, crap. I saw that the Professor had continued his jaunt forward, and was now videoing from almost right beside 52 blue. He was 10 metres away and drifting closer. I began to call his name, when movement drew my eye. One of the growths had moved, turned. It had turned downwards, facing a black rectangular slit towards Spinks. Goosebumps erupted all over my body as realization struck like a nauseous tide. It wasn't a growth at all. It was an eye. It happened fast, too fast to react. A bullwhip crack as if something streaked out from 52 blue. The static of the comms ripped into my ears. A half yell, cut off quickly. Then silence. Silence, except for a muffled keening sound. "What was?" Sheila began to say, before trailing off. The dark body was warping, undulating. A bulge was forming from the rear end of the whale and began to slowly ascend. The entire 52 blue then changed. A coloured ripple went through the entire body mass, and I got the impression of stripes. The muffled keening continued. Horrible understanding shot through my body. Not a whale. Not a whale at all. It was an octopus. And the keening sound was the muffled screaming of Professor Spinks as he was drawn further into the centre of the beast. "Oh God," Sheila whispered hoarsely. I was vaguely aware of Mike in my ear, imploring me to tell him what was happening. But I couldn't move, couldn't think. I could only hear the strangled screams. Then there was a horrible crunch, and the screams were cut off. The crackling and crunching continued, and a small cloud of blood leaked from 52 Blue's midsection. Those eyes rolled towards us. They fixed upon me, a dull, predatory gaze that swept through me like cold fire. It began to turn. The panic I felt was enough for me to break out of my dread-made cocoon. I reached out an arm and grabbed Sheila's wrist, yanking her towards me. Her eyes, glittering with fear, met mine. "Go!" I screamed, yanking her along with me as I started kicking. We both thrashed for the boat, dropping cameras and decorum as we swam as fast as we could. As I swam, pieces of the horrific puzzle fell into place in my panicked mind. We'd thought that 52 Blue was a whale calling for a mate, or one of its own kind. We were wrong. We were so wrong. It was a predator. A cunning predator using calls and sound to mimic and lure its prey. A cephalopod that has developed far beyond its tiny cousins, and using its mimicry for offense rather than defense. A horror from the depths that haunted whale migration paths, picking off those who strayed. And now it was after us. Tears came unbidden to my eyes as we slowly closed the distance to the ship. I saw Sheila risk a glance back, and her scream filled both my comms and the water. Despite myself, I also looked back, and what I saw turned my muscles to jelly. Abandoning any pretense of stealth, the octopus was coming after us. It was no longer dark. It was now a brilliant mass of contrasting stripes and pebbled skin that bunched and rippled as it jetted after us. It wasn't fast, but it closed the gap steadily. The fleeing whales, the thought shot into my mind as I raked at the water. The whales had fled. They knew. They knew what was coming after them. Maybe they'd known for a long time and altered their migration paths because of it, which meant, oh God, did it know we were there? Had it been after us all along? The thought was swept from my mind as adrenaline peaked, sending my body into a desperate race for survival. I saw we were only 10 meters from the vessel. Sheila was still behind me, her panting heavy in my ears. 5 meters. I pulled slightly ahead of her, ready to grab the railing and hoist us both up. Something touched my bare leg. Barely a brush. Then pain lanced through my limb as something tightened on the spot, a ring of fiery agony that shot up my legs. I was yanked backwards, my scream dying in my throat as I struggled madly. I reached desperately for Sheila, who turned to stare at me with wide eyes. Then she turned away, kicking to reach the boat while I was taken. A bullwhip cracked to my left. A striped tentacle snapped around her head, and a muffled scream erupted as she was whipped backwards, legs kicking. I got a brief glimpse of wide, fear-drenched eyes. Then Sheila was gone, vanishing into the flaring underside of the oncoming beast. The crunching sounds started immediately. Seeing Sheila's end sent fresh panic coursing through my body. I strained against the grip of my legs and kicked hard, thrashing my body up and down in a feeble attempt to get myself loose. Miraculously, I felt a searing pain redouble in my leg, and I was free. I wasted no time looking back. I wallowed to the boat and snagged a railing. I hoisted myself up, expecting at any second to feel another tentacle snag me and drag me down to the depths. I spilled over the railing and collapsed on the deck of the boat. My breathing came in ragged gasps, my chest heaving as I gazed up to the clear blue sky. In moments, there were a ring of faces gathered around me. The foremost one was Mike. My assistant leaned over me as I wheezed. What happened? I could have almost laughed at the absurdity of his question. Instead, I rolled over and vomited uncontrollably on the deck, shaking as the adrenaline drained out of me. Mike knelt down next to me. Sheila? The professor? Gone, I said hoarsely. It took them. 52 Blue? He asked, the colour draining from his face. A whale took them? Several of the crew exchanged glances. No, not a whale, I began, when Bluey's voice spoke up. Holy bloody hell, what happened to your leg? Rolling over to a sitting position, I looked down. Blood oozed from a puncture in my calf. No, not a puncture. A perfectly round circle of flesh that had been torn out. A sucker, I thought, my nausea renewing itself. A single sucker. So lucky. If it had been even one more, I would have been a goner. I realised the crew was waiting for me to say something. I opened my mouth to warn them, to tell them what was lurking beneath the ship. However, something beat me to it. A series of dull thuds reverberated through the hull of the ship. Low, rhythmic thuds that formed a familiar sound. One that I recognised. A bass riff. A bass riff that could have been from a Queen song. My breath froze in my lungs. My throat dried instantly. A mimic. It mimics. I reached for Mike, but he was already gone. He headed for the railing. "That's Red Dog! Red Dog scanners!" "No!" I rasped. "Get back! Dylan must still be down there. The water erupted with a bullwhip crack. Something struck Mike's chest, snaking around his neck. He was plucked from the deck, never even having time to scream as he was yanked violently underwater. Yells and screams sounded from the crew as blood rose to the surface a moment later. I struggled to my feet, screaming through ragged lungs for the others to get back. It was then that I saw the eye, hovering just below the surface. Its rectangular pupil locked on me, and I felt the cold malevolence of 52 Blue as it gazed upon its new food source and the morsel that had gotten away. It's been 4 hours since then. 4 hours since we found out the terrible truth. 4 hours trapped indoors in the ship's cabins. We can't go outside. Its tentacles patrol the decks and have snatched any crew member brave or stupid enough to venture outside. Bluey was gone. He was amongst the first, taken as he tried to signal a passing plane with a flare. We felt the crunch of his bones through the vessel's hull. We've radioed for help, but it'll be hours before it arrives, and I'm not liking our chances. Even now, I can hear the scraping and sliding sounds of tentacles along the deck, along the doors, probing for weak points, prying loose materials. I may be a whale expert, but I've heard about octopus, about how they do not give up and will keep after food until they found a way to remove any obstacles between themselves and their prey, to open containers, to get their prey within. I remember those eyes and that calculating, predatory gaze, and I know it's just a matter of time. And through it all, I hear its call, its high-frequency call, interspersed with mimicked human sounds and screams. Yes, we found 52 Blue, but it wasn't lonely. It was hungry.